In part two of my conversation with Dr. Levine, he explains the science behind somatic experiencing and the techniques he uses to calm the body. When the body is calm, the mind will follow, achieving a sense of inner peace or balance between the two systems. When that's achieved, we feel more connected to our outside world and more connected to others, which is a state that's most elusive when we struggle. This is the power of somatic experiencing.
So one of the things that we did is at the end of every day, we would walk down to the beach. And one of our students was a qigong instructor.
Okay.
And we would go out to the beach with him at the end of every day. And we would start by doing some of the simple qigong exercises. And then we would sit down and then talk, make contact with the other people and talk about, some of the stuff we were experiencing and using some of the tools that we use in somatic experiencing, so they're not carrying the fear with them or the grief. So it has a way to process it somewhat. And it's kind of interesting because when we were doing that, some of the people who were at the hotel, who were running the hotel, working at the hotel, they could see us down at the beach. And so they came down and said, we don't know what you're doing, but I can see that you feel so much better when you come back. So I said, well, you're invited. So then people from the hotel, they would go in shifts because they all couldn't go at once. And then they would bring some of their friends and families from the village. And we would also make a kind of a ritual about this. So it doesn't have to be qigong, it has to be some way of mobilizing the body. So somatic experiencing is helping people find these new experiences in their bodies that contradict those of overwhelming helplessness. Let's do one more exercise.
Yeah.
The idea here is to take an easy full breath, and on the exhalation, to make the sound woo, as though it's coming from the belly. Okay. So to make this, and I'll demonstrate it. So I make the sound, and I let it vibrate it into the belly, the sound and the vibration, and let it go all the way out, and then just wait for the new breath to come in, filling belly and chest, and then again. So I'll demonstrate. That's it. One more time. And just rest. And just notice any sensations, feelings, thoughts, images.
Calmer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Use my back against the wall a little bit more. There's
Yeah.
wall, so I'm more attuned to my body contact, where the points are on my body.
Good. And how long did that take? Just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, if that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that can, really shift. And a lot of, again, from your population, they really want to know why you're doing it. What's the explanation?
Exactly.
And there is an explanation. There's a nerve that goes from the brainstem, back of the brainstem, the vagus nerve, and goes throughout the entire body, goes to all of the organs below the diaphragm, and even affects the heart and the lungs. And this nerve, the vagus nerve, was actually first described by Darwin. He called it the pneumogastric nerve, so gastric and lungs. And he realized at the time that this, by the way, this is the largest nerve in the body, that 80+% of that nerve is sensory, is afferent. So it's taking information from the gut bringing it back up to the brain. So you see something, you're first responding, and you're coming and you see somebody bleeding out on the ground, you
Mhm.
know, and you have that moment of horror. So that's the brain sending down that message, ugh. But then that ugh, because it gets the input from the guts, it then sends that back up into the brainstem and amplifies it.
Mhm.
So we start with oh, and then it goes and then and of course, if you're responding, you know you're going to have to override that.
Yeah,
But when you override it, you still are going to have to address it so it doesn't accumulate
right.
over time. So again, using those tools to reset that feedback loop. So
Right.
you're giving it a new signal that's different than the distress, that's different to the gut twisting yuck. And
When would you do that? Would it be back at the fire hall when you
yes,
reach?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably not going to, people aren't going to want to do it right at the scene.
No, no.
But no, when they get back,
In a safe, controlled context is when you
exactly,
start.
exactly. And again, this is what we did on the beach after our day.
Right.
We went out and we practiced those things together, and then we shared with each other. Because, that sharing is really important because it also brings us into connection.
Yeah.
And connection, again, is something that helps down-regulate the stress reactions, the stress responses.
Which again is another risk factor of the COVID pandemic because a lot of protocols, even within first responder cultures, change to depersonalize us. Because, of
Yeah.
course, social distancing, what we should be calling physical distancing,
Yeah.
uh, is required on duty as well. So we're used to congregating and ritualizing, making food together and sitting
Mm-hmm.
beside each other. And now even that is kind of a, something that we have to consciously think about and retrain our
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
Yeah.
again, I think once you do it, 2 or 3 times, I mean, just like you did, you really realize that its value, its particular value. So you're more likely, and again, I mean, the guy culture more likely to come. I mean, that obviously isn't happening. I maybe isn't happening at the fire station, but you want to get back and you want to, take up some beers and
Yeah.
do something to distract.
Or, like typical fire culture, having a cup of coffee, which is a diuretic and stimulating the stress response more, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So these exercises that we've kind of gone through today, would you refer to this as the titration that you speak about with exercise?
Yes, yes. You don't want people to be overloaded
Mhm.
by sensations and feelings. So you want to do something just a little bit at a time, and that's what I call titration.
Yeah.
So there was a form of therapy that started to be developed around the time I was developing my therapy, and it's called exposure therapy,
Hmm.
prolonged exposure therapy. So they would have the people relive the worst part of their trauma over and over and over again to drain the swamp.
Hmm.
But it doesn't do that. I
No,
mean,
it's that closed loop of traumatic thing.
exactly. It just recycles and recycles and recycles.
Play. Yeah.
So, yeah, so these kind of things, again, I think it's wonderful, to share a meal,
Hmm.
to, practice some of the exercises and to wait, and then wait for the next um, printer,
Yeah.
output to come. But you're more ready.
Yeah.
You're more ready. Again, I think people in first responders think that if I relax, then I won't be prepared for the next time. But it really is, if anything, the opposite of that.
Mhm.
If we regulate ourselves, regulate ourselves, we won't be carrying that stress from situation to situations. And if that first responder had gotten down on his knees by me and said, I'm here, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to call an ambulance, I'm just going to stay here until the ambulance comes, it would have made such a difference.
Just a world of difference. Absolutely.
World of difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And it's easy to overlook that given a first responder. I'm 9 years into it now and I've gone to 3,000 calls. And so it's you know, it's pretty easy to, I mean, we call it compassion fatigue as as a
Yeah,
simplified term, to not really recognize the needs of a patient.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
something that I think is a very good reminder that I will be taking back and
yeah, yeah,
talking to people about. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I think that we think that if we do, be with our feelings, that it'll make things worse because, the feelings interfere. And of course, you don't want to have feelings when you're in the battlefield. But even when you're, with somebody who's been injured, you still do want to have some feeling.
like I hear quite a few of my colleagues who served in the military, and I'm sure police in particular, when they go to a restaurant, they'll sit with their back
Mm.
against a wall and
Yep.
have a direct look at an exit point. What's your perspective on that type of observation?
Well, this was one of my first big mistakes. In the 70s, I started working with a number of people returning from Vietnam. And because I was fortunate enough, I was in a medical scientific program, so I received a deferment. But people that I knew went, and some didn't return. Some returned psychologically injured, some stronger. Um, but I felt that that it was my duty to offer my skills to them, so I would have one day where my practice would be open. Anybody wanted to come in, I would do pro bono work. And so this first guy came in, and I realized the moment he entered the door is that I was between him and the door. So I said, "Oh, excuse me, I forgot to arrange my furniture." So I changed it so that he had a direct line to the door. The other thing is, almost before he sat down, he started telling me all of the horrible things that he had seen and was made to do and did. And when he told me that, even as I'm describing this now, again, I get a little lightheaded, a little bit of nausea, slight amount of dizziness. And that's what happened then. And I said, uh, I said, Bill, call him Bill, when you told me about those things, uh, I experienced myself dizziness, almost like I was going to pass out. And it's not because I was judging you, because I know enough about war to know that war is hell. But I knew what to do, like I did on the ground when I was hit by the car.
Right.
And I said, and so I did that. And now I'm just fine. I'm sitting here and I'm present for anything that you want to talk about. And I said, I think that could be a tool that could be helpful for you and your brothers to be able to do, you know, uh, for each other, with each other. And the next week, so that was the first week.
And
So
how
he,
did you do your self-disclosure about how those stories made you feel internally?
well, it was self-disclosure, but the main reason was I was illustrating to him what I knew how to do, so I didn't get stuck with them. So I wouldn't go home
Right.
feeling those distress.
Right.
And
Wow.
then,
Client-centered times 20 there. It's amazing that you're able to reflect back. I mean, transference, counter-transference as a way
yeah,
to build that alliance and build
yeah,
teachable tools in between sessions is really amazing.
exactly. So the first Thursday, that was the day I had open. And I said, don't worry, if nobody comes, I'm working on something. So I'm writing something. So the next Thursday I came, I was a few minutes late, and I saw there was a line down the block and around the corner, and all of his buddies, he told them what happened.
Yeah.
And so they all came. And so I went into I had a room in somebody's house, a friend's house. So I asked them, I said, would it be okay with you if I just did a group together and, just to take over your living room? And so that's what we did. And so I taught them some of those exercises.
Yeah, and your caseload must have just skyrocketed after that.
Well, right. Yes, exactly. They would come in, but the main thing is that they knew that they weren't stuck because, if you feel that there's no way you can go with this, you don't want to talk about it. I mean, either don't want to talk about it at all, or you just talk about it over and over again with your colleagues, but that often just actually re-stimulates a lot of the fear and the anger, the fear and the rage.